High school is perhaps the most enjoyable period of our lives. Many people consider their college years to be the finest, but I prefer high school since there was more fun and less stress. It's when we've just shed our child skins and are transitioning into our adult bodies. We mature into young adults. There were a lot of funny experiences in high school. However, mine has a scary side of it. I was called a high school demoniac, and this is my story. Please call me by the name Jennifer to hide my identity. This is the story of how a seemingly harmless game of Spirit of the Coin could have a terrifying impact on my life. No one could have known that by playing the game or by only being around those playing it could trigger a demonic possession. To protect the identity of my loved ones, I won't mention the name of the school, but this happened in the Philippines. I am sharing this experience to help those who are still being oppressed by evil spirits, and I hope this testimony will prevent others from following in our footsteps. I studied in a public secondary school. It consists of 3 4-story structures named after our past town's mayors. These buildings encircle a covered court with a stage where school activities were conducted. The school was built on the site of a former cemetery, which had to be closed and relocated as the area's population grew. When I first learned this, it gave me a weird vibe. We belonged to the star section. My best friend, Dan Eileen, was with me in that class as well. I am not an exceptional student. I only give enough effort on my studies to have an above-average grade and to retain my spot on the top section. But nonetheless, you could still say that I'm one of the best in the school. Dan Eileen, on the other hand, is my exact opposite. She doesn't care about her grades, and you could see on her attitude that she does not care if she landed on the top section or not. In fact, this is the first time that she landed in the top section. Even she made it a point to joke that she only made it because someone made a mistake. We became friends right away when Dan Eileen joined our class. She's fun to be with, and she causes a lot of mischief that entertains everyone. We never thought that one of her mischief would scar our young minds for life. One afternoon, we learned that the teacher for our last subject is not around. After a brief moment of celebration which drew the ire of the teacher in the adjacent classroom, Dan Eileen asked me to accompany her to the library. When we arrived there, she opened one of the computers, fired the browser, and typed, "Spirit of the Coin template." To say that I'm intrigued is an understatement. I have watched a lot of Kija-inspired horror movies, and there were always terrible things that followed after the game. "What are you doing?" I asked Dan Eileen. "This is called the Spirit of the Coin." Dan Eileen took the piece of paper from the library's printer tray and raised it. "I saw this on YouTube yesterday," she explained. "I know what that is. What I mean is, isn't that demonic?" I tried to persuade Dan Eileen to reconsider. "Oh please, there's no such thing." She looked at me. "You don't look like the religious type." She grabbed my left hand and ushered me closer to the paper. "This is just for fun, don't worry," Dan Eileen assured me. "As long as I do not participate, I'll be fine," I said to myself. I nodded hesitatingly. It was already dark when we returned to our room. Only a handful of our classmates are still around, and Dan Eileen was elated that the class next door was also gone. Dan Eileen did not waste any time playing the game. She was joined by a few other classmates while I looked from the corner near the door of our room. They placed a 5-peso coin in the center circle that is labeled start and placed their fingers on top of the coin. It did not take long for the coin to move. They asked a few yes or no questions, and the coin moved to the answer. The longer they played the game, the heavier I felt. Our room's light flickered a few times, which made a few of the students shriek. But everyone kept playing the game because all suspected that Dan Eileen was actually the one moving the coin. I'm not feeling well, so I decided to close my eyes for a bit. When I opened my eyes after a couple of minutes, Dan Eileen and the rest are still playing the game. I held my head because it's throbbing with pain. I was about to ask Dan Eileen what the time was when I noticed a little boy whispering in my best friend's ear from time to time. I did not pay much attention to him because I was thinking that it was some classmate's little brother. "Dan, it's getting late, we should go home," I interrupted their game. I looked at Dan Eileen for a second and moved my gaze to the boy. When the boy saw that I was looking at him, he locked his gaze on me. "Wait for a while, we're having fun here," Dan Eileen protested, followed by a few of our classmates telling me not to spoil the fun. Fine, I whispered to myself. That's when I noticed the boy already standing in front of me. I didn't notice him move from Danny's side into my seat, which is a few feet away. "Hi there, little boy," I smiled at him. The boy's eyes widened and he suddenly had this evil grin on his face. The more I looked at him, the more I noticed that his eyes were turning all black. At the same time, I felt fear that I never felt before. In hindsight, it is what you would feel when your life is in danger. Something that you would feel if there's a poisonous snake in front of you. I was so shocked by the sudden turn of events that I fell off my seat into the floor. I was crying and shaking when I landed. The boy was immediately on my face even after I just landed. His all-black eyes locked to my eyes. His small arms wrapped around my neck and his mouth wide open. He's making a continuous eerie ticking sound. I was hysterical. I kept on pushing him away from my face, but no matter how hard I try, he's still there. His small and feeble arms slowly suffocated the life out of me. I woke up in the principal's office surrounded by a few remaining faculty teachers that night. Some were holding my arms and feet down. I was so confused and didn't know what's happening. I looked around and saw a few students looking at me from the window. Dan-Eileen was also there crying. Right behind Dan-Eileen was a woman in a black dress. Her hair was disheveled and she had a black veil on her head. She was holding a red candle that can barely illuminate her face because it's so dark outside. For some reason, there's no light in the entire school. I focused my eyes on the black lady and she reciprocated. She slowly moves her head from behind Dan-Eileen's head, showing one of her fierce red eyes. I can feel hatred and contempt for the way she looked at me. She showed me half her face while the other half was hidden behind Dan-Eileen's head. She held Dan-Eileen's neck with her left hand, revealing her long black nails. She looked at me intently and licked my best friend's cheeks while keeping her eyes locked on mine. I immediately went hysterical again and blacked out. When I regained my consciousness, a pastor was with my teachers and was reading verses from the Bible. For some reason, I felt severe hatred and contempt for the pastor. He kept on invoking, "In Jesus' name," which aggravated the hatred I felt for him even more. During that time, I swear if I managed to slip one of my arms from those holding it, I would have ripped his face off. When I looked around, a few other students were also hysterical on the floor, including Dan-Eileen. They are also being held down by a few other people. Some of the students are laughing, some are crying, cursing, and spitting on people around them. I felt that my head was spinning. At that point, I was not sure if it's just vertigo or if my head was literally spinning. I looked around the windows and there were a lot of people looking in. There were no more students among them. Most of those looking at us were grinning, their eyes wide in delight of what's happening. Some have their faces bloodied and disfigured, while some looked outright demonic in appearance. I looked back at Dan-Eileen on the floor, and standing on her chest was the black lady. The black lady was looking at me smiling. She spat on my face. I don't remember anything else after that. All of the students are eventually delivered from the demonic possession, due to the combined effort of the pastor and a priest that arrived later. The school was closed down for a week to give way for a cleansing and blessing ceremony by both the pastor and the priest. I was apprehensive and very much afraid to go back to school when the school opened. But sooner or later I will have to face my demons. It's just that the saying became literal on my part. Besides, my friends will be there. Dan-Eileen will be there. Come Monday, I heard the tragic truth. Dan-Eileen hanged herself in her room. Her parents told us that she has been complaining of demons nibbling on her arms and legs whenever she closes her eyes. This led her into a week-long sleepless nights, and she was not touching her food. Until the day before we all went back to school, her parents found her hanging by the neck on her room's ceiling. No one could ever have thought that an innocent game like the Spirit of the Coin could cause a devastating and lasting scar on us. My advice for anyone that is foolish enough to follow our path, I say, don't do it. It's like playing with fire in a gasoline station. Not only would you burn, but your entire neighborhood. Even now I feel that it is still not over. Recently, I woke up at night because I felt cold hands were holding my neck. It became so terrifying that I'm so scared to sleep or to even close my eyes. Honestly, I don't know how this haunting will end or if it will end at all.